Hello, everyone. Let me know if you can hear me and if I look like I'm in a kung fu movie again. Or I'm eager to see what this week's tech problem is because it's always something new. And I'm also eager to hang out with you guys because it's been a while. I didn't think about it, but of course I couldn't do a show last Monday because Reaper had all of the stream equipment at the hotel, and then they had to take it back, and then Justin had to put the studio back together. So a Monday show wasn't going to happen. So now I get to see you guys again. And I'm going to talk a little bit about ReaperCon and some other stuff, kind of have a smorgasbord of stuff to talk about. Excuse me. So I think that's mostly better since I got home, but it is possible that I will have to mute and cough a bunch now and then. But I think whatever was blooming, the past month or so has stopped while I was gone at ReaperCon. Coffee Nerdery Beer says, my daughter loved your blending class. She was putting her newfound knowledge to use yesterday. That is great. I'm really impressed with her for practicing because I am very bad about taking a class and then not using that knowledge immediately and kind of waiting until I need it, which is not the best answer because you want to be more proficient at a thing when you need it. Hi, Nico, Mage of Mistra. Zero told me how to say his name, and I have, of course, already forgotten. But hello. So I would also love to hear about what you guys have been up to. What did you do for Labor Day weekend? Were you able to come to ReaperCon? If you didn't, were you able to watch some of the streams and take some of the online classes, or did you do some other super cool fun thing for Labor Day weekend? Or maybe you sadly didn't have it off. But I'm going to talk a little about some of what I did and saw and got at ReaperCon. I'm going to do some swatches, and then, well, let's go to the other view. Okay, hold on. I have to refresh that camera, apparently, because that is not what is currently on my desk. There we go. That is what's currently on my desk, and I was going to show you. So I still have a little bit to go on this figure. The Noel, whose name I never remember. And then, so some of the artists stay a little bit later after ReaperCon, and when I went to Reaper and asked Ron what he needed painted, this is one of the figures he needed painted. So I started that while I was there. And these are both actually production copies. I don't think that there are, there weren't enough masters to send them to artists. So I don't have this camera. I try not to put the lights in your face, but we'll find out what happens. So I'll probably be working on these later, but let's talk about some other fun stuff. So I'm often really bad at shopping at ReaperCon. When I go to other conventions, I buy all kinds of stuff, but this year I went through the dealer hall and I took a lot of pictures. And then I forgot to come back and get things I was interested, other than I got these things from Mini Masterworks. And I'm a little less excited about this than I originally was. I just set up my palette and then I was reading the instructions, which I did not do on site. And you need 16 drops per ounce of water in your wet palette. And I measured it, and I use about a full cup of water in my wet palette. So I have a piece of paper towel over my sponge, and that really adds like a whole bunch of water. So I can't, I'm an artist, so I can't even do the math of 16 drops times 8 ounces. But it's a lot. It wouldn't take me very long to get through this bottle, I guess. So I'm going to try it with a little less in it, and we'll see how it works. Because I don't leave my palette like forever. My problem is just that I leave it unattended for like a week, and then the sponge or the paper towel start to get slimy. So hopefully I just have a minor problem. Clavicus says he really likes that dwarf sculpt. I know he's just a butcher, but what a great sculpt. Yeah, I love all the figures from the Chop Scullery location in Brinewind. It's like takeaway restaurant that's all run by the smaller demi-humans, so dwarves, halflings. I think there's a mongrel man. I have some halflings to paint too, I think, but that were the hotel. I mean, they're all going to go on sale eventually, but I did not bring them over to my desk right now, so that was unhelpful of me. Let me turn this light on. You can probably see them a little better. So I'll work on those later, but yeah, they're very characterful sculpts. I think they're all Bobby Jackson, and he loves your shorter character type braces. So he put a lot of character and heart into them. And then these are like brush protector things. So I actually have a couple of different cases that I use when I travel, because I rarely am just traveling with one or two brushes. But I thought it was an interesting idea and I wanted to test it out. So the idea is that you put the ferrule on the sponge part, and that will let you accommodate a variety. I mean, I don't think a brush this big would work, but I do have some fatter. So like there's two different handle sizes and ferrule sizes of brush, and this would let the little pod accommodate either. So you protect the bristles and then you close it up. So I thought that was a cool idea, and I'm pretty sure they sell these on their website as well. So if you need some because you like take supplies to work or to a paint day at a store, they're a great answer. I don't think I'm going to need this brush today, but let's free it just in case. So I meant to go back and look at a book at the Scale 75 booth, and then I totally forgot about it until I saw another friend post a picture of having bought the book. So I wasn't very smart. Kuruniko reminds me and all of us that is Hackle Black Hook 30038. That's the pirate Knoll. Clavicus has been very happy with all of the non-human villager type models. I agree. AJ Payne saw those brush caps and is intrigued. So now you've kind of seen how they work if you think that's worth ordering. Valander says honk. Are the brush protectors cat proof? I mean, I don't think they keep your cat from carrying it away, but they would keep your cat from biting the important parts of your brush, which I have had cats get kind of excited about brushes. But I usually leave mine out. The one compromise my cats and I have made in my direction is that they don't go on my paint desk. Most of the compromises have been in the other direction. Valander says, imagine a class on color theory named Game of Tones, and that is pretty genius. Trashmara went to the scale booth looking for Chimera paints. Luckily, when I got home, I had a set available locally. Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know anyone was selling them locally. I have a set, and I want to use them a bit more. Then I have some basically Liquitex and Golden both reinvented miniature paint, and I want to check out those. I did find one weird thing just in my casual use of the Chimera is they seem to skin over pretty fast, even on a wet palette, which is very weird to me. But I shall check that out later at my leisure. Like 3 years after I bought them or whatever, because I take forever to do stuff like that. So did anyone watch the streams and stuff? Because that was the interesting thing about them doing it both ways at ReaperCon, is that if we were there, we didn't get to see all the fun stream stuff. So I'm trying to go back and watch some of it on VOD, because I'm kind of curious about some of what people who weren't there got to see. One of the things I got to see was us playing Reaper Errant live. We didn't have all of our players, but we had some of them, and it's hard to see, but I got a super cool Nightheart gaming shirt, which has dragons on it, and I collect dragons, so I'm very excited about that. Kuruniko says that our cats are better trained than his. My husband is currently outside with our cat that walks on a leash because he got bothered so much that he just gave in and did that. Let's see what other goodies I have. Well, you guys actually got to see this before anyone else did, the Mermaid. So I put this in the contest, and I was awarded gold, which I'm very happy with. But even better, I was awarded the theme of the con award. So every year there's a theme of the convention, and this year, of course, was like pirates and Brinewind and all that kind of thing. And I very rarely have an entry that's thematic, so I'm excited that that I won this award, but I'm even more excited because it's super cool. So I'll show you guys what it looks like. So it's like a really big version. Where's my Sir 4 scale? It's like a really big version of Captain, of course my mind goes blank and I don't remember his name right now. So there you go, spot quiz for chat on what this figure is named. I think there's actually 2 versions of him. There's one with a hat as well. But they printed out like a super big size of him to make the award, and I think it's super cool. Let's look at the back of him. So if you've ever wondered what all those little gewgaws are and whatnot, now he's got rings. In this character, as described in the Landlubber's Guide to Brinewind, really has, like, he loves magical items and he has a ton. And he's always on the hunt for new ones. So it's appropriate that he have lots of neat little things. It's very in character. What else did I get? Oh, in case anyone's wondering what the medals look like, they're a little bit different this year, was my understanding. They got them redone. And then I think they all have the same color ribbon now. So it's actually a double-sided coin. Barnabas Frost. Thank you, Valander and Kieraniko. And Valander says he's holding a magical Pez dispenser, which, I mean, if you lived in a fantasy world, I think that you would find that a pretty cool item to have. And Zero gives us the number even. It's 4028, and it's sculpted by Jason Weeby. So, and I'm going to show you a thing. This I did not get at ReaperCon. When we renovated, I got some stuff to make like a little trophy shelf, which... So I feel weird about saying that, like I'm bragging or something, but it's sort of so I can go in there and look at it and remind myself that I don't suck now and then. When I get to feeling like I suck. But one of the things I did for my Reaper medals, I think it's mostly just the Reaper medals, is I got one of these. I think if you search for plastic mini easel, you might find something similar on Amazon, which is where I got mine, and I had a few left. And it's hard to show under the camera, but it puts them at a slight tilt so that they're nicely on display. Because I just had them as stacks of boxes before, and it was like, well, what's the point of having all these things that Reaper has very kindly made for us if I don't do something with them? So that was my answer. What else? Oh, one of the fun things I did, I don't know if any of you watched this stream. Trash says I used mine as a drink coaster. I don't know, is it stable enough? I think if the etching is too deep, I would be afraid that it would knock over my drink. Mage of Mistress says, I do the same thing. I have a wall of me, so when I feel bad about myself, I can look at it and realize I'm pretty freaking awesome. That's great, Mage of Mistress, because a lot of us are kind of, you know, we get down on ourselves. I also have like a couple of postcards and cards from friends who said nice things, and I put those up somewhere that I see them often, so when I'm feeling crummy, which, you know, 2020 and 21... been a lot of feeling crummy, I can look at those. So one of the streams I was in, so I was in the Reaper Errant stream, and then I was also in the Celebrity Bones, they call it Bones Mashup, I think, right? So this is like a class you can take at ReaperCon if you come in person, and it's really fun. I mean, I did it once, you know, in the actual class, and I had a ton of fun. I meant to go get my favorite little miniature from that because it's just a little rat, and I put butterfly wings on him, and I think he's super cute. But this was Punk Rock Dog. So if you didn't watch that stream, you can go watch that one. I suspect they're going to chop them all up into the individual content segments when they put it on YouTube to make it easier to find, because I think right now it's just like 9 hours of each, you know, day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4. But you can watch my glue curse in action, because it was very much in evidence during the Bones mashup. So like Ron got through like 8 or 10 guys in the time that I made 3, and my guys weren't even staying. So this is like a little pedestal for him. I figure if you covered up those things, we could make it look kind of industrial and stuff. I probably won't paint him. I do want to paint the little rat with the wings. But I was thinking about it, and if you kind of want the at-home Bones mashup experience, here's something you could do. I mean, almost everyone has some stuff from the Kickstarter that they don't love. So you could, hold on, let me get my thing. You could, you know, take those ones you don't love, or ones you had 2 of, or ones you didn't use all the bits of, and just throw them in a pile. And even if you have plastic miniatures from other companies too. And have your own bone smash up at home. And if you have friends locally that also have miniatures, you can kind of all pull your stuff together as a group and have some fun with it. But if you come to ReaperCon in person, I highly recommend doing that because it's super fun. I think one of the ones I did the other year I did it was like, I think I called him Fist Puncher because I just put like a giant's fist in place of some guy's head. And there were some other modifications to that one too. I think Fist Puncher and the couple other ones that I did are around here somewhere. I actually put the little rat in my display case, so I could have gotten that one out. The other ones, I'm not entirely sure where I put them. All right, so now we can do some swatches. And then at some point I've decided what I want to do next week. I think we all need a break from ReaperCon stuff, so I need to do something completely different. But this is the paint. Oh, Dr. Bob said he submitted one of his mashups in the open this year. Yeah, I thought that was super cool that some people painted up their mashup creations, and now I know who one of those people is. That's really neat. So this was the triad in the VIP bundle. I'm going to take my next paper away while I work with water and whatnot. And I'm just going to reuse one of my old swatch thingies. I think the exposure's a little dark on that. All right, so apologies or you're welcome for the ASMR people who hear me breaking into this package. So we've got an interesting theme of paints. These are all skin colors for, fantasy type characters that don't track with natural skin tones. Dr. Bob says, Weeby and Bobby always say they love seeing the mashups show up in competitions and to steal ideas from us from new models. Yeah, it's possible that, the back of the sheet actually does work. But some of the backs of my sheet are where I screwed up doing the writing, and you couldn't really use the back of the sheet. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if they did snag an idea or two from people doing the mashup, because I am always amazed when I see people. Sometimes you see people walking around after that class with their stuff, and it's like super cool. This brush may be a little bit too big, but we'll find out. So this one is Dragonfolk Red, and I have a Dragonfolk in our current D&D campaign, but it's like supposed to be a bronze type, so I will probably paint it a different color. And honestly, I would be perfectly happy to use this as a shadow color for human skin. It kind of is like, so there was this trial called Redstone that was one of the sadly canceled items. And I liked using the Redstone highlight and Redstone, just straight Redstone, medium, middle value, as a shadow color for Caucasian skin. So that is Dragonfolk Red. Maybe I need to zoom out a little more. And then I'll zoom in and look at the colors. Trashorama said they could use your idea of reverse centaur. I'm a little terrified of your idea of reverse centaur. I'm not really sure I want to see Jason and Bobby go nuts with that. It sounds potentially very not terms of service. So that's Hellborn Red. And that's a nice kind of brick red, which is a color that as big as the Reaper catalog is, I feel like we do need a brick red. So that's good. And then this is Wild Folk Gray, which kind of has I don't know if I still have Drow Nipple Pink over here, but it has like a bit of a Drow Nipple Pink vibe. Would also be good as a highlight for like drow type characters, I think. Okay, I got way too much water on that one. Just pull it off and drag the rest of the paint down for the thin part. So those are pretty nifty and they look like they'll be handy. Kuroniko says, I didn't even realize the VIP stuff went up on the site and I missed it. My understanding is there were only 40 packs left, so I'm guessing that a lot of people missed it, unfortunately. But hopefully they will do the paints as a separate thing that you can buy at least. Often the VIP bundle includes resin figures, and Reaper doesn't make them. They get them done outside, so they can't produce them in the number that would be needed for, you know, mass sales. So I don't know. One of the figures is like a bust, so it would probably have to be done in Bones or Bones Black. But the other one, it's possible they could do, I mean, maybe it's possible. I don't know how the machine works. But it's possible they could do in Bones USA or Metal. Oh, hold on just a minute. Oh, I had the mute the wrong way. I am going to run take some cough syrup real quick. So I'm just putting this here if anyone comes in the street. I'll be right back. Okay, apologies for not having done that earlier. I thought I was better, but I didn't talk for 2 hours until today, so that's probably what happened there. Dr. Bob says the Reaper brush holder is far better than the initial brush holder that they made for RVE because it's much sturdier. I think it looks pretty cool too. And then also, I love painting dragon folk, but as a player character, they don't appeal. The role playing of a big lizard man in what is typically a human based society is just extreme. Well, I mean, I guess it depends on your campaign role too. But yes, I could see that. My husband almost always makes a lot of us play humans, so I'm taking a little break from that. All right. Oh, I didn't mean to show off one more thing. This was the con booklet, which gives you some information about the activities and the theme and all that kind of stuff. Kuroniko's character type that they like to paint but not play is fighters. Love painting armor, hate playing meat shields. Yeah, I can see that. Mage of Mistra asked if I use watercolor cards or index stock cards for my paint samples. I have done it with index cards. That's what this is. It will buckle a little. So when I do it for you guys to enjoy, I use watercolor paper. So this is Canson XL paper. It's pretty cheap. And I'll show you these again once they dry, which they clearly have not. But if you are really interested in swatches and you haven't seen the previous episodes, I have not written down the number, but I've done 2 shows on how to do your own swatches and different ways of doing it. And the thing I actually settled on was this. So I decided it was easier to have the swatch right on the object that I would be taking the paint out of. So I always have done this, but I came up with this idea during the swatch shows. So paper is great too. It allows you to, take different swatches and mix them together if you separate them and do some other stuff. So somewhere on, these are old enough that I don't think they're on Twitch VOD anymore, but they're on Reaper's YouTube channel, which is just Reaper Miniatures. I think 2 words, but it should show up in a search either way. Dr. Bob loves tieflings and feels that horns are okay in a mostly human-based society, but scaly lizards are just a bit too far. So someone a couple weeks ago had asked how similar was Drow's skin to Ashen Brown, or vice versa. So Ashen Brown came out as one of the Kickstarter colors, and that's actually a resurrection. It's been resurrected twice now. This is one of the paints that will not die because we love it. And then Drow skin. No, okay. No, I was thinking of other colors. I thought I had the 2 to compare, but I don't have the right ones to compare. So I will do that at a different show. So I think that's all my Reapercon stuff. And then I just have, my idea for next show, but I will save that a little bit and get painting. Are we dry? Well, the dragon folk is dry, but the other 2 still need some time. So I need to put this in a safe place so that I won't smudge it. Because those of you who have watched the swatch shows, I think I put my phone down in the swatches one time, or something like that. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with the label smear. Those ones are actually pretty small. I often do it a bit larger if I can, because this is thinned down, and I use where is it? I use brush on sealer to make sure it adheres, because this is the new labels are a slightly glossier paper. So I thin it down with this instead of water. It will give it the same kind of transparency so that you see the undertone, but it ensures it sticks to the paper. And some of the other, like non-Reaper brand paints that I have, also I have like super glossy labels. But you get built-in text to test the transparency and stuff like that. So this is, where's the regular bottle? So this stripe down the middle is the paint applied full strength, so I can see the transparency. And let's see if I can find one that's more transparent. I don't know if I didn't put the stripe on the first set I did. There we go. There's an example. So this is like a lot of paint applied to get the mass tone. But then if you just do a swipe, even full strength, this is a slightly transparent paint, which is not weird. Because dark colors are often slightly transparent. I tried it with the new labels, the pre-printed ones. I thought that's what I was using on one of my tests, but I don't know. This is one of my newer paints, and it does feel slicker, but I thought I had one, because there was a sample or something that came out, and during the swatching thing, people were fairly certain that was one of the new labels, but I guess I will try to double check with somebody at Reaper and see what they say. So I'm actually going to put my palette to the side. I would like to paint with the palette visible, but it always seems to mess up the camera. So, but I will try to show you the palette if I do anything interesting. Dr. Bob says the smear is going to be so much better. There are some cap dots that just don't convey the true color, like Nightmare Black. Yeah, you have to thin a paint down a little to see the real color, the undertone. And I like to do a lot of glazing or working transparent colors into shadows, and I need to know sorry, I'm looking for something. I need to know the undertone, the real color that goes into the color to do that. So I'm actually going to start with this guy, because what I want to do with him is going to take time to dry. in between steps. So I'll do a step and then go to the knoll, and that should work. Because what I'm going to do is, I'm assuming that his jerkin, I don't know what we would call this outfit, but I'm assuming that it is kind of leathery. I don't want to make it super worn out, but I do want to kind of give it some interesting elements. And something I have done before, I learned this from a painter called Fernando Ruiz. He has the company FER Miniatures, is to apply multiple washes of different colors. And you get this kind of interesting mottled surface to begin with. So this is the color, even though it doesn't look like, it looks darker in the bottle. This is the color that his outfit is painted. Smock. Is it a smock? I mean, it's pretty full body for a smock. But either way, as the butcher, yes, I'm sure that he wants to not wear his best clothing. And I definitely need to put some smears and blood and whatnot on the apron. So this was my starting color. And now I'm trying to decide, when I was at Reaper, I guess because, you know, they're moving the building around and doing some stuff, they haven't run paint club since COVID, of course. So the color selection was it was just basically the initial bone set and then a few other things. So I just did a lot of mixing, and not a lot of mixing because I haven't like fully painted this guy, but some mixing to try to just work with what I had, which is not a bad thing to do. Working with a small color set and forcing yourself to mix helps you learn a lot more about colors. And I'm not saying that the starter set of the bone, 54 bones isn't a small set, but it's certainly small compared to Reaper's whole catalog and picking out the exact color you want. Zen Bacon says Nub. Yeah, that's his name. This is Nub, the dwarf butcher, and Zen Bacon is thinking of starting on him tonight. So I'm gonna do some weird colors. So I got a green, a purple, and a brown. Or do I even want to? I want to be all weird maybe. So it's gonna kind of end up sort of brownish, I think. But I will go ahead and do the green, dragon red, and the purple. So the purple is the closest one to the complementary color of this, which is gonna dull it down. That's fine. And this may or may not work. I mean, I've done it several times where it's worked just fine, but I'm hardly the most practiced person at doing this technique. That's partly why I want to do it. I normally get brushes out before we start, and now it's been a whole 2 weeks, so I'm totally out of practice. It's always very disruptive for me to go to cons, and it takes me a little while to get back into my normal routine and whatnot. Because I'm easily distracted, I guess. I don't know. So let's see. I'm going to start with the red. Oh, I have a lot more than 54 colors. I have an entire wall of paint. But so the Reaper facility normally has a rack of the metal racks, if your store has those. And it's got 100 and some colors on it of the core MSP colors available for people who come to Paint Club. So since they had a game store, they also had an area where people could come on Saturdays and paint in Paint Club, which is very cool. But because of COVID and then, moving things around and building a new building, they've been doing that. So I think the rack wasn't even there. So I think they probably packed that up to take to the other building or just get it out of the way, and they just have a little small, the smaller rack, the counter rack of the bones over on a side table. So I think I probably thinned this too much. Since we seem to have some new people, I will show you the thinning test. So this is just an old piece of paper with text on it. And there's previous thinning tests. These were all from the Mermaid, I think, actually. I used a lot of this color on her. So this is quinacridone red PR 122 if you buy artist paints, and I did use artist paints for that one color, but I'm 95% certain that Reaper's clear magenta is that pigment or as close to it as makes no difference. I just have all these other paints that I don't use enough. So yeah, this would be great for a glaze. It just barely tints the paper. Like if I was adding blush to someone's cheeks or something, that would probably work great. But I'm trying to do an actual wash, so I want to pump up the pigment a little bit. So rather than adding that to directly to my pool and playing the game of add paint, add water, add paint, add water, I'm just going to add a little brush full in at a time until it seems closer to what I want in a wash. Sigwolf says, on the subject of swatches, I've been using the HP Premium Choice Laser Jet 32 pound bright. Super bright. It's heavier, almost cardstock, but it's not as heavy as watercolor paper. It's strongly bleed resistant and doesn't warp buckle with a little water from the wash test either. So that's good information for people who might want to use paper for swatches. Dr. Bob asks, what brushes do you recommend for a beginning mid-range painter? One of my friends got feedback that he needed to improve his tools. I suggested the Reaper brushes, but what are your recommendations otherwise without spending $$ for Da Vinci's? My suggestion is to spend $$ for Da Vinci's. So most of your stuff you're going to be doing, you can probably do with a synthetic. If you're trying to do detail work like paint eyes or a little filigree or whatever, you want a good brush. You need a sable, a Kolinsky sable. So even, I mean, you could try a red sable, but in my experience, you need a quality made Kolinsky sable, which is, I like Winsor Newton, Series 7. They have a Series 7 miniature, which is a slightly different shape of the brush head. And I like that, especially for freehand and detail work. I like these for blending too, but if you're comfortable, if you or your friend are comfortable with blending with the synthetic brushes that they currently have, that's fine. Don't worry about it for that. He could get away with one. Buying two would be better. You get one that's pretty small. You get like a 00 maybe, and then a 0 or a 1. But first of all, there is they do feel different. Like I started with pure synthetics and then I switched over fairly early, but I'd probably been painting at least 6 months, maybe a year before I switched. And there was an adjustment period of getting used to how the brushes worked. Carrie Michael Cosby says Rubeloff. I don't think that's the exact spelling. I don't think there's an O. Has cheaper Kolinsky if you're willing to buy directly for Russia and wait for shipping. This is interesting. I would actually like to know more about that. If you could private message me a link. When Kirill Kinev came to the U.S. to do workshops, I think the brushes he had were Rubeloff. I think they weren't even finished wood handles, but he got some nice tiny little brushes. For some of the stuff he does, you need tiny little brushes, which most people will say you don't, but he was right. And then he needs some of this. So if you initially just use the brushes for your important stuff, like, so I have a different brush to mix my paint with. A lot of the European painters I see will just do everything with this, and I don't know, I guess they go through one every 6 months and it's worth it to them for saving time or whatever. But if you mix your paint with another brush, you do your base coats with another brush, you make sure to use that soap every now and then. You don't have to use it like constantly. Rinse your brushes out regularly and then use the soap every now and then. Those Kolinsky brushes could last years. So I mainly use this one. Like, this is kind of my workday brush, is a size 1 Winsor Newton Series 7. I think it's about 9 to 12 months, depending on how much I'm painting. I go through them. But I like a really, pinpoint tip. If you're lucky, like Anne's brushes wear out in such a way that they just get finer and finer. So she can start using her old work brushes as her detail brushes. But my detail brushes I've had for years, the smaller sizes, because I use them for very specific applications, and they don't get a lot of wear and tear. I don't think the Reaper Kolinsky sables are massively different in pricing to the, the name brands. But what helps you there is if you're ordering something else and then you get to the free shipping mark, then you don't have to be shipping. Because if you order from like Dick Blick or Jerry's Artarama, those are the two big ones in the US. Also, Cheap Joe's is an excellent one to order from. And if you want that palette like Anne has also, you could order some brushes and that palette. Although I think Cheap Joe's has a smaller selection of brushes than Dick Blick. The other nice thing about Dick Blick is they have measurements. So they have how long the bristle is and the radius of the bristle head, I think. I don't think it's just the width. I think it's the radius. And I found that very useful because I realized not too long into using these that I don't like a brush that's too long. I like a kind of specific ratio between the width of the bristles and the length of the bristles. And that allowed me to try new brands because I could pick things out that were kind of similar to what I like. And that's why I don't have a lot of Da Vinci brushes, because they tend to be narrower and longer, which some painters love. So it's not necessarily that there's like one right brush, but no synthetic in the world will make that fine point. I don't know if we can get any. Can we get closer? We can get a little closer. Let's see if we can look at that fine point. Somewhere I have a photograph where I took pictures of various brushes. And now let me try to get let's make it wet so it's an equivalent comparison. This is Reaper size 1 synthetic. And it's going to be a little hard to tell, but it doesn't quite have that fine point. So instead of telling you, I will show you. Let's see. Where did that little piece of index card go? For watercolor, like actual, picture size things, I will mostly use synthetics. But you're talking size 8, 10, 12 brushes. The detail work you're doing, and I would often still go get my little tiny brushes. All right, so I'm super zoomed in. Let's see here. I make very tiny little dots. Also, you can paint with this line, and you can go wide, which we would rarely paint this way, but that's what they do on paper. And one of the tests the guy used to show us in the art store is he'd just go see how long he could go, because they also hold a bit more paint, which I think is part of what helps. So the paint's getting a bit low, but I mean, I went off the screen with it. Now let's try the synthetic. So it's hard to see, but there's like a little hook on the end. And this is a brand new brush. I think I broke out a brand new one for something we were doing earlier. So I just cannot get the dots as tiny or as consistent as I can with the Real Sable. Sometimes I've been able to do it where you use like the side of the hook. It's a lot harder to do that, go wide, go small thing, which I think kind of is something that I do with blending sometimes. Mostly I do the dots now to blend, but I used to kind of use that feature, I think. And then let's get a full brush load and see how far we can zigzag. So it actually did a little better at the zigzag test than I would have expected when they do this with watercolor and bigger brushes. Like the one brush keeps going like over a huge page, and then the synthetic brush doesn't have much of a paint load. But you can see, like, for the actual full paint load, this was the Kolinsky, and by here the synthetic was already not at a full paint load. Let's see. Thank you, Carrie. I'm glad you're going to PM me, because I will probably not remember. I do sometimes come back and watch the stream after, mostly to see if I missed stuff you guys were saying that I need to address later. And Zen Bacon says, I hate it when the wood handle of the brush is super long, too many face and eye pokes. And Carrie Michael chops it shorter with the flash cutters. And I would recommend that. So short handle brushes are made for mostly watercolor painting, gouache painting, things that you do where you're kind of sitting like I am here. You're just holding the paper in front of you, doing your thing. The long handled brushes are for people who want to work on canvases because you're supposed to step back. You're supposed to hold the brush at the end and step back. And there's a lot of painting reasons why you do it that way. But if you're doing close-up work like we are, it is not advantageous to have those super long brushes. I had some that I bought that I had to buy for some reason, and yeah, I chopped them down. You might, if you do that, you might want to like varnish or lacquer the end where you cut it off, or eventually you could start getting the wood chipping. All right, so this is just a wash, so it's not going to be like precision applied or anything. It's kind of neat that he has the hood separate because you can kind of see the color difference that it's creating. I'm going to do something different with the inside of the sleeves because I don't want to mess with that. Just put a little in. So when you think about how much miniatures cost compared to how much brushes cost and how long they last you, I know it hurts, but it's worth buying a quality brush. Look out for sales. Sometimes they do have them. So it was a mistake of mine to start in the middle of this. I should have started off to one edge, but we'll just try to be quick. Happily, my syrup worked. So yes, if you met me at ReaperCon and I seemed at all weird, I was taking coating cough syrup pretty much the entire trip. So it was that or cough my face off. And this is a perilous time to have a chronic cough condition. I'm just looking for spots I might have missed because it's really hard to come back over a wash or glaze once it's dried and integrate little spots that you missed. And I'm just going to put a little more on here. But this is going to take a little while to dry. So we'll go back over to the knoll. Hackle. I don't know why I can't remember that because it's a great name. And I don't envy Ron having to name all the things. Bird was stone. Well, just mildly. Just took the edge off, I guess you'd say. I meant to get some putty out or something so I could sit him in the desired orientation. All right, I'll put the wash cup away. And now the question is, do I remember any of the colors that I was using to paint this before? And the answer is nope, not at all. Well, I remembered a couple of them as I was shaking paints before the show, but we'll find out, I guess. So I think I want to do, there's a little bit poking out, which I think was me not cleaning it up well enough, not a hair. But when you have hairy cats, it could be a hair. Let's see. Let's go back to the chat. Dr. Bob says the hook is a pain, but a little bit of a blessing when I'm trying to put a tiny dot, eyes especially, somewhere. What I like the hook for is stuff like this. Do I have a nice hooky one here? I have a hooky brush. Sometimes they wear out, and then I'm very sad because you kind of have to use a brush until the hook naturally forms. And it doesn't always form the same way, so it's a bit suspenseful. But we'll just pretend this has a little more pronounced of a hook. So if you've got those like long, you know what? I think I have one here because of what I'm going to talk about later. You've got like these long capes or robes, and sometimes it's hard to get under the edge. So I use the little hooky to get under the edge and hit those spots where you might have white that still shows or black if you're using black primer, and that really helps. So I do like having a hooky brush. I just use it for very specific things. Carrie Michael Cosby. I really love the feature of changing line size with brushes too. I was so resistant to give up my synthetics, and I'm so glad all the pro painters on Twitch convinced me to switch. So worth it. Yeah, so there are a lot of things where people people talk about you have to do it this way or you have to use this thing, and I don't think that. But brushes are kind of like the one thing where, like, if someone comes at me with you can do everything with a synthetic that you can with a natural hair brush, I'm just like, nope, I'm not having any of that. If you can do marvelous things with a synthetic, then you're going to be amazing once you get used to a real Kolinsky sable. You are just making your life harder to not get one. So I think I want to paint the guard and the buckles with non-metallic gold to have a little more contrast. So I'm just trying to pick out some colors, but now I see a very important thing that I also have to do before I do that. And what colors is this guy on? Like a reddish brown. We'll call that good enough. All right. So the important thing that I forgot is lining. So it's going to be a lot easier to paint details like this if I line them, I paint them dark first and then paint the other colors over. Julia Trent said, I never got to see you at ReaperCon. Unfortunately, we were only there one day and I never saw you on Artist Row. Well, I'm sorry I didn't get a chance to meet you, Julia. Yeah, between judging and teaching and we did a couple streams, I'm not always able to be at my desk. And I love that they gave us little dry erase things that we could write down our schedule on, but then I was bad about always writing that down and explaining when I was going to be there. Sigwolf said I was there all 4 days and only saw a lot of people in passing. So many people to see there. Yeah, I have people who are good friends that I barely got to spend time with. I barely got to see Anne. There are lots of other people that I barely got to see because just you're running around trying to do stuff all the time. Sigwolf says, that's how I feel about the folks who insist dollar craft store paint is plenty good for minis. I kind of feel the same way. I do think it has its use. You can use it in, if you're painting terrain or whatever, you're going to go through a bucket of expensive paint. If you are using, fancy paints. There's probably a step up from dollar store, though, even there. But I do think that, your time and frustration level are also worth something. And it's worth using quality tools. It doesn't necessarily have to be like 100% the best quality, but purpose-made tools. Like, people complain about the coverage on miniature paint sometimes. And then I've seen people come from craft paint because where they're going to cheap out is the pigment. Pigment is what makes paint expensive. Like, if you go to the art store and you look at like these things, these are going to be two very different prices because phthalo is like cheap as dirt and it's in everything, and ultramarine is a lot more expensive. So they're going to have, see, this says series. Okay, that's weird. The phthalo is actually a higher series. All right, well, for whatever reason, I paid more for phthalo than I should have. So this paint, because it's series 2, like series 1 is going to be the cheapest, and that's like black and white, and some of your earth colors are usually series 1. And this probably goes up to series 5 or 6. And depending on the paint company and what style of paint it is, a high series paint could be $20, $30, $50, $60 for a tube. So you're not getting ripped off if you pay, $3.79 or whatever it is now for one of these. But I would, I guess if you're only willing to use dollar store paint, I'm not going to lecture you about getting a really good brush, but I would encourage you to get, at least for the hard colors, stuff like purple, some reds, some yellows. Try, purpose-made miniature paint and see how you like it. Maybe you're not going to need it for everything, but there's some stuff that you'll probably find it useful for. Dr. Bob says even dollar store is better than tester enamels. The memories. Yeah, I didn't paint then. So I didn't start painting until after testers was no longer the thing that you used to paint. So I actually got it a little tiny, and this one is a Da Vinci, because when it's the tiny detail stuff, I don't mind the thinness as much. So just for a size comparison. Now that is the other funky thing about brushes. The sizes are not standardized across the industry. So it's just a comparative size within the brand. So, because Reaper has like a 40-0 and a 20-0, and I think the 20-0 is the same as Da Vinci's 3-0. So, when you get to the larger sizes, it's a little more standard, but, I mean, not standard, but there's kind of a little more commonality, I guess. I don't know if I thin this down too much. So this is a trick that I wish I'd thought of for the first Learn to Paint kit, but I did this in the Bones Learn to Paint kit, where I would paint these lines and then have people paint over the like silver or gold or whatever. All right, now I'm losing my... I don't know if you guys can hear a super sad cat, but there's just... Oh, no, I see the actual problem is that this is not blue liner, so it's not going to be as dark. A sad cat may burst into the room and require petting. They have still not forgiven us for going away. Which, I mean, I get. They were sad and lonely. It's kind of like, oh my gosh, they've turned into Velcro cats and they're just like on us constantly. You're right, they should not forgive us. I would like, I think if we have to go away that long again, I would like to find someone to actually come cat sit them and not just bring them food. Although the sad cat that you may or may not be able to hear right now, she kind of does not acknowledge the existence of other people. She's sort of like, whatever. I have 2 people that I know, that's all I need. Can't count past 2. And you are not one of those people. But I think by the end of it, the friends that were taking care of our cats said that even she approached them for some attention because she was that sad. And I will also line around here. So you may notice that I am not worrying about if I get paint down here. I do not care. I care about being neat where I've already painted. So I call this worry about one side of the line. Because if I'm painting stripes, this is what I do. I worry about this side, and then I flip it, and I worry about the other side. And the paint just meets in the middle, and I have a line where the 2 edges are nice and straight, and the middle gets built up. There are occasions where this is not possible. I'm not saying it's bad to learn enough brush control that you don't like get your paint all over the place. But that is my answer to lining. That's why I'm doing it now instead of waiting until I've painted the whole figure. So that I don't have to stress myself out trying to make a tiny perfect line. All right, you guys are chatty today. This is great. Sounds like Mage Mistress having the same problems with some Velcro cats. Yeah, it's kind of like, Kitty, I gotta do some stuff. Can you back off just a little? Oh, Miniature Stand, hi. Welcome, Raiders, and there are a lot of you. And Carrie Michael Cosby is asking Luca if he has a second to say which size style is his favorite reaperlive brush. So we've been talking about the importance of using, that there's no substitute for a Glinsky Sable brush. So if Luca, if you'd like to comment on that, Bryce, you could comment on it as well. And I'm just working on hopefully finally finishing up this Knoll Pirate that I've been painting for a little while now. And we're kind of talking about Reapercon and sad cats and lots of different things today. No one's really said much about if they were watching the digital events. Oh, happily Luca was still here and he answered. He likes the Rubelov 1010 size 1, 5, and 2. Let's see if this guy is dry. Very scientific. Stick the brush in the corners and see if there's still paint wet, which there does not seem to be. So he's going to get another wash. So that was the Dragon Red over Ready Flesh. And now I'm going to go crazy and put a different color on. So yeah, you kind of came in the middle, Raiders. So if any of you have any questions or anything, just let us know and we'll catch you up to speed. These figures that I'm working on are both Bones USA, which is one of the plastic lines that Reaper Miniatures produces, and they are also both pirate or pirate adjacent type characters. So they're both, the dwarf is described in the source book of Reaper's piratey stuff, and the gnoll is just an actual pirate. So that was water, and now I'm mixing a little brush on sealer, which is essentially medium. So matte medium, glazed medium, is that kind of thing. And that increases the strength of the paint film, and it makes it less watery, so it's easier to work with. So sometimes I'll just use straight brush on sealer medium as well. And now I'm going to do my little wash test. So for those who weren't here before, this is the result of previous wash tests. So this would be an example of a wash that's probably not thinned down enough. It's going to cover up too much of my underlying coat. And then these are washes where you can, it's like definitely there's color there, but you can still see some of the underlying text. And then this is an example of how I would thin paint or dilute paint for a glaze, where it's really just a little hint of color and you should be able to read and see all the text underneath. One of the things that's interesting about applying these different colored washes is that you'll find the color darkens quite a bit, the underlying color. I don't think there's enough of that green in there. So I'm going to get a little more. Let's see. So more talk of shopping and fun things like that. Mad Mortigan 68 says, by using the sealer you are able to achieve glazing. I can thin Reaper paints down with straight water. They don't tend to fall out of suspension, and I will glaze with those. I just find that I like the consistency. If there's at least some medium in there, it will also make the paint stronger. So when you add water, you're diluting, if you imagine my fingers are little particles of the binder in acrylic paint. So the thing that makes the pigment stick on stuff. And they're normally like this. If I add a lot of water, they're like this. They're very separated from each other. That is not a strong paint film. Since the medium is essentially the binder part of paint, I can get transparent color while still keeping enough of the molecules together that it makes a strong paint film. For a glaze, I don't think, or even a wash, I don't think it matters tremendously because I'm applying that over a base coat of a solid paint film. But I also think it doesn't hurt to do. Definitely if you're applying thin paint directly to the surface of a figure, I would want to apply some medium to make it sturdier. So Anne calls it breaking the paint because you're adding so much water that, and there's a limit to the amount of pigment you can put in a paint without making the paint more fragile. Because you've got to have the ratio of the binder particles is what turns it into sturdy acrylic paint. So I'm hoping the green will give a bit of a nice contrast with his very red beard. Well, not very red, but you know, like a red hairstyle type beard. I didn't want to make him like neon red. Currently it looks a little funky, but we have one more color to apply over this, so we'll see what happens. And again, for those who weren't here earlier, this is a technique that I learned at a workshop with Fernando Ruiz, the Spanish painter who also owns FER Miniatures. So he does this for, he does it on metallic sometimes. When I took his workshop, we were doing it on a very light color, like a creamy type color to make like buckskin, or you know, kind of the inside part of leather where you might have the outer area dyed and it's a bit of a tougher leather, but then the inside part is like a lighter color. So I really like this technique for leather. But I don't really have like set in stone guidelines for how I decide which weird colors to do it with. I'm just trying to use stuff that I'd already used on the figure to have more color harmony. But then since that takes a while to dry, I'm putting him to the side and we'll go back to the knoll. Mad Mortigan 68 says, I'm pretty new to the hobby. I'm using Reaper paint and have been trying to thin my paint using a mix of water and Liquitex Flow Aid. 2 parts water to 1 part Flow Aid. However, I'm growing suspicious that the Flow Aid isn't helping. That's a lot of Flow Aid. So Flow Aid is just, or Flow Improver is another name for it. It is just meant to help your paint flow a little better off the brush if it feels a little bit too sticky. I do use it. I mainly use it for detail work. But when I talked about breaking the paint, Flow Aid is essentially water in terms of will this break the paint. So Flow Aid and drying retarder, both, they're additives, they're not mediums. Whereas something with medium in the name, or this Reaper Brush On Sealer, is a medium and it's the clear part of paint. So those other products are things that are meant to do specific stuff on your item. So if you want more information about that, I'm not sure when it was, but go on to YouTube, Reaper Miniatures channel, and then search for additives, mediums, and pastes, oh my, or something like that. And that I did like a whole overview of all the stuff you can add to your paint and why you would add it to your paint. So you may not even need to add it to your paint. I mean, you can make a glaze with just straight up water. I'll go ahead and use that same green. What may help more is how you apply it. So you want as large a brush as you feel comfortable with, and you want to work kind of from like one corner of the object to another, which I sort of did on the dwarf, but let me see, I don't think I have any figures handy. You know what, let me pick a different color and I can do a glaze on this guy. Go to the purple. And I'm just going to use straight water. I just have it in this dropper bottle, so it's easy. I guess I'd also, like, what are you trying to do with glazing? Are you trying to do layers, like to add highlights and shadows? Because really you want a little less thin, like a little less transparent of a paint. I know some people do something and they call juicing, where they just do like dozens of applications of super thin paint like this. But I think you would be happier to thin the paint a little less and do fewer coats, at least to start. And I do have more information about how to do both glazing and layering in the Reaper Learn to Paint Kit Layer Up. So Reaper has 2 Learn to Paint kits, and that one's called Layered Up. So when I was testing the wash before, I don't always test washes. I can sometimes tell from how it behaves on the palette, kind of how it looks on the, because you can see where it's fallen down from the palette, and I can see some of that white underneath. So I already have a good idea of its transparency. With glazes, I always test because I'm painting over existing stuff. So I will wipe out a lot of work if I don't have the glaze of the right consistency. If you're trying to create blending, I suggest that you don't thin your paint down that much. You're going to get streakiness, probably, which may be bothering you, or it's just going to take you forever. Unfortunately, I've worked through most of the big parts of this, so I'm not going to be showing a lot of layering today. And I was going to use different stuff on this guy, but I could do like a real quick. So I don't even thin my paint at all for layers anymore. It's taking forever because you're making your paint too thin. So what I would generally recommend, I work with thicker paint now and more transitions. That's the other thing you can do is more transitions. I actually just got water in that, so I'm going to do this again. I still feel like the camera's kind of dark. All right. So this is paint straight out of the bottle. Now remember, the different pigments are going to have different opacities. So kind of the binder's all the same or very similar, but the pigments, like all yellow pigments, are transparent. Well, except cadmium, which is not appropriate for use in miniatures. So you can see that this paint straight out of the bottle is so opaque that it covers up the letters underneath. So what you want to do is add enough water or whatever else that you can still see the color, but you can also kind of see through the color. And that's how you build up successive layers. You kind of try to make the edges as soft as you can, and then you build up layers. Actually, I think I have my thing. But all right, let's do this just quickly on the paper. So that is more what I could consider a layering consistency. You can see some of the letters underneath. Maybe you can't see all of them. But it's more transparent, but it's still depositing color. So it's going to get you where you're trying to go faster. I just use this kind of thing for shifting colors, basically, or adding complexity to colors. Like if I'm trying to put blush on somebody's cheeks, or I want to add a little purple shadow into the crevices of something, which I will do with this guy and the purple here. So I would apply it all over if I were trying to, shift the color. If I'm just trying to make the shadows a little more interesting, which I often do, I'm going to apply the glaze just to the shadows. And I'll do it just on the top so that you can see it has more impact than you would think paint this thing could have once it dries. And I might have to do multiple coats, but that's a different story. But let me get my visual aid. Because I happen to have it with me. This is just going to be a real quick overview. These are actually in the Learn to Paint Kit layer up instructions that kind of explain it a different way. But this is what you're trying to do. So I painted the whole square this color, and then the whole of the shadow section this color, then this part the next one, and then the really darkest part was just at the very bottom. It would be in the crevices if you were doing this on a figure. I've been confused on how layering is different from glazing. Does it have more to do with transparency, opacity? Well, one thing to think about is that we've made up a whole bunch of terms. So glazing is a real term in painting, and layering is too, but there are some other terms in the way we apply them that are specific to miniature painting, and different people will use different terms between them. So there are people who layer up with super thin things like this. It will take you a long time. They're trying to do like extreme display level things, and even then I think there are better ways to get there. Way better ways to get there. I never really understood the popularity of trying to layer with like super, super thin paint, because there's no way that it isn't going to take forever. What you can do is, so I painted this one. The main difference in and this is the opacity. This is how much I thinned the paint down to do all these squares. So you can see some of the white of this plastic card through the paint. So it's slightly transparent, but it still has the defined color. At the end here, I did two different types of glazes. So this side is really watered down, the original color. And that you can see that the lines are a bit smoothed out. So that's one way to help deal with making your lines smoother. If you do that, you can also see that the light color isn't quite as light as it was, and the dark color isn't quite as dark as it was. So you probably want to do more contrast than you would do if you didn't plan to add a glaze. This side is the concept of changing the colors. So I use this magenta to go over the blue to shift it a little more towards purple. I might do this in the shadows, or if I paint something and it's not quite, oh, yeah, it's frozen. I'll fix it in just a sec. And it's not quite the right color. This is a way to kind of shift your color without having to do all of your painting again, which you may still have to, but at least it helps. All right, let me just refresh the device. Maybe we'll try that. There, I think that fixed it. That's the one problem that's me and it's not Twitch and I can fix, other than the weird sound. So there are other ways to glaze or to layer. There are other ways to make smooth transitions on paint. There are various methods of wet blending and some other stuff. This is definitely an area where there's no one correct way to do it, and you may need to explore some different ways to find out what works for you. So the glaze is dry now. Well, let's zoom way more in. And I think you can see that those shadows now look a little deeper than the ones on the bottom. And I'll do just this big one on the bottom. Let that dry. So I really mainly just use glazing for the color shifting, or like here where it's going to add depth and color interest and stuff, but not be super obvious. So to me, and glaze is actually a term that I think most painters agree on as being super thin down paint. All right, so here is green coat, which I think maybe has dried. So I will add the purple. Although I want to do a wash now, so this purple is probably too transparent. So for a wash, I find you need something I think it was just one over that, maybe two at most. When you're putting different colors over one another, it's like this guy's coat or whatever it is getting darker and darker because I'm adding different colors over it. So it can look like it changed the color more dramatically with just a little bit of paint. Okay, now I've lost one of my brushes. There we go. So I'm trying to do washes on this other guy, not strictly glazes. I don't mind if it's pooling in the shadows. That's the other thing with an actual glaze and with layers too. You are applying the paint in a controlled fashion. It should not be going everywhere. You want to do what we call wicking the brush, which, let me just get things back in camera view. So if I have like all that paint on my brush, it's going to go all over everything. And kind of, well, that's a repelling surface, but that's the kind of thing you do when you're trying to get, you know, paint to stick in the crevices of like the chainmail or something. You might do a black wash over there. But a glaze or a layer, you want to apply in a controlled fashion. So first I'm getting some of the paint off there, and then I'm wicking it off on here so that I can paint a controlled straight line with it. Maybe we'll try so this is just like how I would do a wash. Well, wood is too absorbent, so it's not going to do it. But that is wood. That's not the... Well, here. We'll do some on his base. This may beat up. I don't know. So it's falling into the crevices because that was a big pool of paint. Where if I, with my brush, I should be able to paint a nice clean line along the side of the base instead of having paint go everywhere. So that to me is the other difference between a wash and a glaze, is you are controlling where the paint goes with a glaze and you're letting it follow the contours of the sculpt and fall into crevices and stuff with a wash. Am I in view? Is everything out of focus because the camera hates when I have my tools in view? And I think someone asked me a question about palettes that I will scroll back. I think the question was whether I always mix washes and glazes in a separate palette. And I don't always, if I just need a small amount. Oops, I don't want stuff there. Or I'm painting, like when I'm painting on camera, I often end up moving my palette around to show you guys something else. And then I'm more likely to have, you know, paint slop all over and get into other paint pools. If I'm painting, you know, on my own time and I can take time to move things around more carefully, I don't mind doing some washes on the wet palette. I do find that if you're really trying to control the dilution of your paint, which for me, when I first started painting and doing layers and stuff like that, it was very important to do that. It helped me a lot if I controlled the paint to be exactly the consistency I want. And if you watch Anne's show, she does that too. So I don't have the palette like Anne has handy on my desk, but it's got just little circle things. It's almost, if you've ever seen an escargot plate or a lab, it's actually a lab testing plate. You can get some of those and use it. She uses that, and you can control your dilution very precisely. The wet palette, there's less control. But what I tend to do for layers, because that's the other thing that may not have been obvious on my sheet, is if you are trying to get from here to here to here using only 3 paints, there's no way you're not going to see lines unless you do something like spend years doing the super thin glazes. So I mix more transitions in between. I mix this color with this color to get that color, and I mix this color with that color to get, you know, some of these colors. And then at this point, I don't thin my paint at all, because I now have the brush control where doing a bunch of transitions and using brush control is enough for me to get what I want. Back in the early days, I thinned my paint. I had lots of transition steps to make up for not having the brush control. Let's see. Yeah, Mad Mortigan, for years, I had trouble trying to explain to people the consistency thing, and I never liked it's like skim milk, or it's like because I don't paint with milk, so that doesn't help me much at all. So I was pretty happy when I came up with the idea of demonstrating it on paper. I'm not seeing the question about the palette. Yeah, so the point of Flow Aid is kind of to make it easier to paint details, and all Reaper paint has a little Flow Aid in it. Oh. Now I'm completely frozen. What's happening? So I don't know if you guys can still hear me, but I think you cannot. Ah, there, everything caught up. Oh my gosh. I was all frozen for a minute. I don't know if you guys were hearing me or not. So yeah, Dr. Bob, I don't always use a wet palette for glazes and washes. I often use these little things. And these are actually, so you can find these, they call it flower palettes or 7-well palettes. Most of the time you find them, they're a lot bigger than this. I was at a convention and they had these tiny little ones, and I was very happy because that's more appropriate for miniature size. Hi, Nasser. Welcome to the show. Apologies if there was just some freezing because we were having technical problems. So what I want to do is finally give this poor guy some non-metallic metal. I'm not sure. So I'm actually going to use the color that I was just demonstrating with the layers and stuff. But I think I also need to make a slightly darker version. I may not. And this is, when you're painting smaller areas, layering's easy. So the hardest kind of surface to paint with layering is, where'd my little guy go? Is something like this, where you have these big rounded folds, so it's like a very smooth transition. This is less hard because you're going to have your shadow here, and it's going to be a fairly sharp transition between the shadow there and the highlight there. So if you really want to like kind of push yourself when you're practicing, like maybe like for Mad Mortigan, I would say get comfortable with doing the layers at all. But if you want to push yourself, something like this with big folds is helpful. And I actually, and my favorite figure for practicing that with or demonstrating it with is Einarion, the elf wizard. I do not remember his name. So I just had, that's medium right there. So this paint is actually a little separated. It's also pure black, which is why it's separated, because I was looking for my blue liner. So I don't always do this. Like the paint's not going to be messed up if you don't do this, but I will sometimes put the fluid that came out back in here, and then that's an indication that you need to mix this paint a lot more, or that you have some kind of clog or situation if it's a paint you haven't used in a really long time. Yes, if the paint is thicker, it can be a little more challenging to do the layers, but I think you need to try something that's in between, you know, colored water and layering paint like I demonstrated. Because yes, back in the day, I did water down my paint more than I do now. So it's really, I feel like the color is not showing up very well today, but I also have a different screen than you guys have probably. It's just a little laptop monitor. All right, so that was the Oxide Brown, which is from the Kickstarter. And then this is Golden Griffin Brown. That was one of the, in one of the swag boxes. And then I like, so, you know, so I'm painting gold, but I really only have one yellow color here. And I do typically do that. So my middle tone is really this. And then there's a hint of yellow. And then there's like less yellow and then a highlight color, because you're going to get less saturated as you go up and high. Even if I mix this with this, I'd probably get something like that in the middle. And maybe I should do that. Oop, no, I already did that one. So I like to use this or Palomino Gold, or I think that NMM base, I can't remember what it's called in the NMM triad, for my yellow. But I just want a little hint of yellow. I don't want it to be, you know, if you look at yellow gold, it's not really like yellow. Tia Lee says, I found the best way to transition large surfaces personally is a wet blend with a beauty sponge or an eyeshadow brush. I've been curious about those beauty sponges and stuff you could do with them. I don't think they'd come up with all the wild and wonderful shapes that they have for those now when I first started painting. And transferable skills. Yeah, if you are someone who wears makeup, you are going to find it a lot easier to understand some of the concepts and do some of the things in miniature painting. It's funny because often people, you know, there's a guy and he likes a game and his girlfriend or wife is like, oh, what's this painting thing like? And she tries it out. And often she kind of leapfrogs him in skill, and it's because some of the stuff people who learn to put makeup on, some of those skills are transferable to miniature painting. Yeah, Matt Morgan, you've got to make your paint thicker. And even, you know, don't worry if there's transitions. You can try the glazing. You can kind of go over the transitions. You know, I often do like a little stippling to go over the transitions with a mid-tone, you know, midway color. There's lots of things you can do to not get the transition marks. Wet blending is worth trying. But driving yourself nuts trying to paint with colored water is probably not the best answer. You know what? I am just going to go straight up to the brown. So on small surfaces like this, or even the belt, I don't have to use as many transitions as I would have to use for that cloak with all the rolling folds that I showed you earlier. The surface is small enough that people's eyes will blend it for you, sort of. Like, I'm not sure that makes sense, but so what I call layering is making a visual blend. Wet blending is physically mixing two paints together on the surface. And so that's how oil painting works. You've got like a blob, you'd have a blob of this and a blob of that, and you just kind of zigzag them together, and you get the intermediate colors, which is nice, but then it takes ages to dry. Although there has been a renaissance of people using oil paint on miniatures. I have not tried it yet. I'm curious, but I'd kind of like to do it in an opportunity like a class or something where there's someone who's familiar with it guiding us through it. I will use this darker color on the hilt guard thing, though, because that's a larger surface, so I'm going to have to take a little more care to make the blends work. It's still not huge, though, so that is working in my advantage. But yeah, I also don't just think about blending. So, and I say this to you as they've actually called me Bender the Blender a couple of times. So I definitely spent a lot of time and energy in my initial learning to paint days. I bet we can come in a little more. Is it focusing? Hello, focus better. Where's my gray paper? This might help because I think sometimes it sees those little squares. Mad Morgan, you're very welcome. Carrie has the correct spelling for Anirion, the elf wizard. Anirion. Yeah. And he's fun to paint if you're trying to practice. You're blending. But blending is just one of the things to worry about. So contrast is equally as important. And especially when you're just learning blending, it's really hard to get contrast and get perfectly smooth transitions. But don't forget the contrast in the search for perfect blending. I can't remember his name right now. It might be Trovarian. There's a guy who does videos on YouTube, and he recommends that you not even worry about the blending until you're comfortable with the contrast. Like it's, going dark enough in the shadows and going light enough in the highlights and putting those darker areas and lighter areas where they need to be is what makes you like the painting of people who are very good at this. It's not, you think it's the smooth blending, but where their ability to put paint in the places where it should be to create the illusion of naturally falling shadow and highlights is what you like about those miniatures and how they kind of push that to create pop. So I'm not saying I'm one of those people, but if you look at this, and it looks lighter on screen than it should really. Like, I'm pretty much pure blue liner here, and this is pretty dark. I don't care that there's texture there. The fact that there's texture there is not as important as showing that this tail is a cylinder and this part of the cylinder is curving downwards. And this part of the cylinder is facing up towards the light. Same thing with the hair. I didn't go to pure white, which I do sometimes, but there's lightness here, and then it's super dark here. Hi, Corporea, because the contrast is that important. You may even be able to see it best on this little shell thing. So I'm pure white up here in the little stripes, and then this goes down fairly dark. And I struggled with contrast. I totally feel you if you're struggling with it, partly because I was obsessed with blending. But they both matter. And I would say, particularly if you're planning to use your figures on the tabletop, contrast is going to be more important starting out than nice blending, because people are looking at them from 2 feet away. So it's better to, make color choices that make stuff stand out and add, dark enough highlights and light enough shadows That's all more important than if the blend is super smooth that they're not even going to see until they pick up your figure and stare at it, a couple inches from their face. I know it's tough because you are painting like I am with the magnifier. Oh, we're frozen again. Well, that is a Twitch thing, I believe. Even though it says I have no drop frames. Okay, so Twitch was glitching, I think. I don't know what all you heard. Oh, hi, green users. I think I saw you earlier and then I just zoned out. So I was extolling the virtues of contrast, which I will continue to do. I'm not sure when it glitched out, but I was saying if you are painting to use your figures in games, I would prioritize the contrast both in, so you see that this belt shows up really well next to the fur because this belt is lighter and a warmer color, and this fur is darker and a less saturated color. So stuff like that kind of contrast is also important. But when you're talking about, shadow and highlight contrast, that's a slightly different thing. But there, I would say it's more important to, go dark enough and go light enough, especially if you are planning to use your miniatures on the tabletop. And then, as people will remember who were here when I was doing kind of the paint over on some old miniatures to show how I would improve them, contrast is also important for display miniatures. And a lot of people who are trying to paint to a really high level don't realize that the arm's length, the thing, oh no, that other camera is frozen, so you're not going to see it. You imagine holding your figure at arm's length. That is how people are seeing your figures first. They're seeing them on a shelf or a table like at ReaperCon, and the judges know it's hard to do contrast and blending. So we consider that when we're assessing your pieces, especially if it's in the painter category. So we are giving you extra credit if you pull off doing it. This brush is probably too small for this, but I don't feel like wasting more time looking for a slightly bigger brush. Bryce is right, Bob and Julie. We did miss you a lot at ReaperCon. We always miss when we don't get to see you guys. And I've just realized I have no idea what time it is. Okay, we got a little less than a half hour left. So I will try to finish up this non-metallic gold. And then I will very likely just, well, actually we decided this was a she. She's pretty much finished other than this pouch. And I will probably try to finish her so I can finally give this to, give pictures to Ron. And you guys can watch me paint something else. Although that's true, I should tell you what we're going to do next week. So I will take a break from this and tell you about next week. All right, so I think we all need to not talk about ReaperCon for a while. So I'm going to go back to doing kind of, we did some experiments with washes. So now I want to try doing some experiments with dry brushing. So let me have a little box of stuff. And now I've lost the guy. So the figure I was showing you, this is the guy I used for my ReaperCon class, which was a class on blending, but that doesn't mean he can't show us stuff about dry brushing. So I had some of these left over, and I have a couple more that I can also paint blue. Well, that's teal, I guess. And then I want to try like all kinds of different brushes. Speaking of makeup brushes, so I want to try brushes like this. They're super soft. I want to try, maybe something stiff like this. I want to use your traditional synthetic style brush that we use that I think is not as, the flats. Why don't I have... So I have Reaper flats, but apparently not here. There's a smaller one. So these are the brushes that came in the Learn to Paint kit, the Reaper Pro Paint flats. And I meant to bring over a couple other figures. Hold on just a minute. I'm gonna roll back here and grab something. So speaking of Anirian, here he is. And you can see why these are some nice challenging folds that Bobby Jackson has given us. Bobby Jackson is the man to look for challenging folds to blend. So there is only one difference between these two miniatures, and that is the brush that I used. So it's the same color as paint. I did it at the same time. They're both dry brush, but I used standard Reaper flats on this, and I used one of these fluffy makeup brushes on this one. So I want to show you guys that the brush can make a difference in dry brushing, and I want to try some brushes that I haven't tried before as well. Trashorama's aim is so bad he often misses the table when he rolls. Oh my. I roll bad sometimes, but not always. I agree that Bryce is Right is such an amazing name for a show that you gotta look into that, Bryce. Tia Lee says, eye brushes are my favorite for curved surface coverage, which I think is, this style is the eyeshadow brush style, right? This one, interesting enough, is actually from the art store. But I think this was probably the equivalent one in the makeup set of brushes that I got. There were, I got like 15 brushes for 12 or 13 bucks. It was now, some of them are enormous, and if I never paint a tank, I'm not going to get to do much with those brushes. But I do have a giant boat now, so maybe I will get to do something with those. I'm going to try to do a little test so these are the paint colors that I had made up for my class. So it's the color that's painted on the sky is marine teal, then surf aqua is the lighter color, and deep ocean is the darker color. And I'm going to have to test whether there's some of those colors are slightly translucent, so I'm not sure if it's going to, I'm not 100% sure if it's going to work with the dry brushing, but I think it will, and I hope so, because I already have like 5 of these guys that are blue or teal, and it would be fun to reuse them in a project for you guys. So where did my little Noel go? The flat shadow brushes are better for flatter surfaces. Trashworm says, we paint tanks in November for Thanksgiving. Oh, that's pretty groany. That's a groany pun. All right, now the trick is, can I keep him in frame? So I hope that you will come back and join me for fun with dry brushing. And I've probably told this story before for some of you. This won't be news, but when I learned to paint, I actually found washing and dry brushing to be kind of confusing. Washing especially did not seem to do what I was told it would do, because I guess I just didn't realize like it's gonna cover the entire surface. So like with this guy, you know, it might be darker in the crevices, but it has covered the entire surface. And you kind of have to factor that in. So I just got frustrated and said, forget this, and went straight to layering. So I didn't actually learn to do washing and dry brushing until sometime after I'd been painting for a while. And there really is more variation in how people are doing it than I realized at the time. Like some people just like scrub and scrub and scrub and scrub with the brush, and they're going back and forth and all over the place. I like to do like kind of I think of it as, you know, you're Indiana Jones and you're dusting off the artifact. You're not trying to scrub it, you're just trying to lightly dust it. And then, you know, some people now are using like the sponges and stuff. Like there's all kinds of different ways to do painting stuff. So it will genuinely be an exploration for me, because I didn't ever really dry brush as much as most people dry brush. I know it's maybe not appropriate that I wrote the kit, but I did. Has anyone used the Learn to Paint kit from Bones 5 yet, is what I'm really curious about. Because I've seen like Bones 5 miniatures out in the wild, but I haven't seen any from the kit. So these are my transitions. I'm going to try going straight to the yellow, but I suspect for the hilt guard it's going to be too sharp a transition. Trashorama says some people dry brush like they brush their teeth. Round brushes with a flat end are nice for dry brushing. Yeah, I've seen, like there's a few companies that actually have dry brushing brushes. I think Artist Opie? Or Opus Artist, I think is what it is. They have like these brushes that look pretty cool, but they are like, and you already know I don't bulk at paying for brushes, but they're pretty expensive. So my curiosity has not won out over my unwillingness to pay that much money for something intended as a dry brush. I don't think the makeup brush set that I got last year has a really flat-ended one. Well, no, there was... Is this one? No, that's got a curve. I'll have to look at the rest of the set. But I don't think it did. I've decided that I don't like this color, and I am just gonna... This one. I'm gonna mix a color in between with the oxide yellow and linen white. I don't always go up to pure white on gold. I always go up to pure white on, steel or silver metallics. I don't always do it with pure gold ones. Sometimes it kind of seems like it just looks nice with just like a linen white level of highlight. Dr. Bob says he's holding on to the Kickstarter new paint kit as a surprise for his daughter's birthday, which I think is very sweet. I figure most people just got it for the paint and the miniatures, but I did try to make it as good as I could. It was interesting to paint 12 of those guys with one set of colors. I mean, by the end, I was just like mixing wild things together, wondering what would happen, because I was like, well, I already used all of those colors. I already used those colors. I gotta come up with something. I'm not sure it's that one. So for me, that one was kind of a exercise in mixing with a limited palette, which I do recommend. It's not, if you're an artist, the colors in there are not a true split complement. Well, they're not even remotely a split complementary mixing set, because there wasn't enough space to include like 2 reds and 2 blues and 2 yellows, and also include like skin color and brown and metallics and stuff that people need to paint miniatures. But maybe someday I will do a stream where I paint with a true split complementary palette. Because for the people who ask about how, what would the minimum paint set be, you pretty much need a split complementary palette to achieve it. And then white and black. I mean, black's not even as necessary. I know I'm wandering off muttering again. I realize that when I go back and listen to the streams, I'm kind of like, wow, I just kind of mutter away sometimes, don't I? It is hard to paint tiny details and talk at the same time. I will confess. So I think it was while I was moving stuff around that this brush got a little bent. I'm not sure if you can. So it's curving a bit like this. I'm just gonna, straighten it out as best I can and put that brush soap on that I showed you earlier, and leave it, and it should be straighten it out. It's best to not, push the end of your bristles, especially on your nice brushes. But when it happens, it's not necessarily the end of the world. You can probably recover from it. And I won't lie, I have occasionally used saliva to shape a brush. I don't lick a brush that has paint on it, but I do not infrequently lick brushes that don't have paint on it. I didn't see, I was expecting to see people tortured by not being able to lick their brushes at ReaperCon, and I don't remember hearing any wailing or gnashing of teeth. what I kept, because we had masks on, is what I mean. But what I kept doing with the mask on that doesn't work if you have a mask on, is I kept trying to blow on things. Like you'd get a hair on your mini or something, and you try to blow it off or something like that. And that does not work if you're wearing a mask, since the whole point is to confine your breath. But I would keep forgetting and try it again. So some of this is a little rough, and I'll probably have to go back and fix a few things when I can see better. It's not focusing in it. But this is generally the idea of how I might need a transition point between the yellowy color and the more brown color for this. So this is, I didn't like my blended transition, so I'm coming back with a mix between the two colors and dotting it around the edges to clean it up. And then I might dot my brown around the edges to kind of tighten the area up a little. So there are multiple ways to get the look of nice blended transitions, for sure. And some of them you will like, and some of them you will find pains in the butt, and those might be different ones than I like, or that I find pains in the butt. Like I've done the loaded brush thing that Ben Comets does, and I've tried. Well, no, he calls it loaded brush, and they do that in traditional painting for what they call toll painting on ceramics, I think. And I've done a little bit of two brush blending, and both of those, for me, the flaws outweigh the positives. But I know that there are people who, like a lot of people, and some of them extremely excellent painters, like Ben Comets, who love both of those methods. So everyone has to kind of find the approach that works for them. But yeah, that little dot you just saw me make, I don't think I could do that with a synthetic brush. Trash asks, is this a non-metallic metal copper triad? No, this is, I was about to put them away, but I realized I hadn't finished the Knoll. These are still a mix of the Kickstarter and Reapercon paint sets from when I was doing the paint overs on the blacksmith and the bugbear. He was a bugbear, yes, he was a bugbear. I think one of the copper colors is a little pinkier, like this. I probably should have used that, because this guy or this gal wouldn't likely actually have gold things. I mean, unless she's a very successful pirate, and I think she just looks like a moderately successful pirate. Did I get to the brightest? I don't think I did. So the brighter spots that are just little highlights, that's partly what makes things look nice and shiny. And when people say it's got pop, that's the kind of thing that they mean. So when you're going like super dark and super light, it doesn't necessarily have to be, big areas of the figure. And in fact, it's better most of the time if it is not applied over a large area of the figure. And I think I'm going to go just a little darker on the shadow of this bird. Now, technically, if I were being super persnickety about exactness, this would actually be like there'd be a darkness here, and then this would probably be lighter because of reflected light from the earth. And I will sometimes do that depending on the shape of the figure and how fussy I'm being. But this is not one of those figures. So I want it to look nice, but it doesn't have to look like, oh my God, amazing. Because you can't paint every figure to, oh my God, amazing. I used to try, but I think mostly I just made myself crazy. Sometimes you just gotta have a little fun with it and feel the accomplishment of getting something finished. Which I know contradicts advice that I told you guys on other streams where I told you to let your stuff sit and assess it and go back and fix it as necessary. But that is one of the kind of interesting things about art, is that sometimes the advice is contradictory and both things are true. So I have this book, maybe I'll try to bring it next stream, but it's called The Opposite is Also True, and it's by an artist. It's like a traditional artist, or graphic artist, I think. And she talks about that. The opposite is also true. So she'll say a thing that's very true about art, like, color variety is really good, but also using a limited color scheme so that your color choices all work harmoniously is really good. Both of those things are true. And finishing something now and then to a state of less than perfection so you can get that sense of accomplishment from finishing is very true. And not, putting something aside and coming back to look at it again to make sure that it is as awesome as you think it is also true. I'm trying to decide whether this color is right to do the claws, and I'm not sure that it is. Trash says the color looks like old bronze. Well, that's cool then. I'm happier with it bronze than gold because I think it fits the character. She still has to earn her pirate bling. But where are we? Oh, I guess it is just about time to finish up. So I will not paint the claws. Come back next week for fun with dry brushing with these guys. And let me get my little cheat sheet of the shows. So Monday to Friday we have Anne at 11:30 Central Time, which is Reaper time. Monday is me. Tuesday is the Crow's Nest at 5 p.m. I don't actually have any inside info on who the guest might be this week. Then Wednesday is Miniatures Den. Hello, any Miniatures Den people who are still here, with Luca. Thursday is the Crafty Creative at 2 p.m. Oh, Luca's at 2 p.m. too on Wednesdays. But Thursdays at 2 p.m. is the Crafty Creative with Josh Foreman, who definitely is both of those things. But then at 6 p.m. is the show everyone likes best because you can win stuff, Reaper Live. Friday is Reaper Land at 3 p.m., which has some nice community content. And then this week is a Reaper Errand week. Here's my Nightheart shirt that's super cool again. So you can watch me and 5 of the other Reaper artists goof around and have fun and say ridiculous things. And I think, like I mentioned, we got to play. We didn't have Jean and we didn't have Jen, but we got to play at ReaperCon, and we had some guest star artists, which is Derek Schubert and Erin, who may be still here. And she loved I could tell you loved the game, Erin. You were super into it. You were like bouncing in your seat. It was awesome. And then Derek, I don't know if anyone knows this, but you know how D&D is a game with no winners and no losers? Derek has won D&D because that's how cool he is. He's just good at everything. But he and some friends used to go to Gen Con all the time, and they would enter the D&D championships, and they won several times. Trash Ram recommends that I plug the blog, which is a good point. So I don't know if the mod is there to put the link in, but it's birdwithabrush.com, and there's lots of stuff there. If you went to ReaperCon and you got some feedback on your figures and you don't completely understand it, I have a couple articles up there discussing the most common issues that we see in contest entries. And even if you didn't go to ReaperCon and you want to kind of find out some things you can do to make your figures better, those are great articles that I've recently written. And then we got some questions this year that got me thinking that doing kind of a like a lot of the questions weren't about, what's wrong with my figure or what could I do better. But they were about, I thought the contest worked like this, or I didn't understand that, or I entered this category and I didn't do very well. So I wanted to kind of do a FAQ answering those questions. So that's what I'm working on currently, which will hopefully go up soon. And then I'm going to go back to discussing, just like on the stream, how we're not going to discuss ReaperCon all the time anymore. I'm going to go back to talking about more general stuff, and I'm working on another article about color. So I recently wrote one about why, picking the perfect color, matching a color to a photograph or an item in real life isn't necessarily the trick that you're missing to make your paint look better. But now I'm working on one to discuss why it's so hard for you and me and many people to mix a match to a color or that you see in a photograph or other reference. Because there's reasons why it's hard that are not we're dumb. So there are reasons why your brain and your eyes have a lot of trouble with you picking out colors. So I had a great time seeing you guys again. It seems like it's been longer than it has. I hope I'll see some of you next week. Trash, are you able to start up a raid? I see you can. If you can do links, I assume you can do other mod type things. But if not, I'll just wave and stop streaming. But if someone can put up a raid, I will give it a minute because it's nice to spread the Reaper love, as we say. You're welcome, Carrie. Thanks for showing up. David Peterson. Oh, that if you can raid David Peterson, I think that's an excellent choice. I love his. Anyone who loves mouselings is going to love David Peterson. So I'll wait and give you a minute to set up. There you go. Definitely check it out. He's worth watching. Thanks, everyone. I'll just vamp for a minute until we raid. Will I? I don't know. But yeah, say goodbye to the Knoll. This is the last day painting the Knoll. She's waving at you. Okay, I ran out of vamp, I guess.